Welcome to the second interview in this series. We are delighted to be welcoming 4 new members to the POPs board, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Richard to you today. So Richard, I'll let you tell everyone a bit more about yourself shortly, but just by way of brief introduction, you're currently an enforcement lawyer at the Health and Safety Executive, but I understand prior to that you worked for 5 years at the Crown Prosecution Service, and you also have experience of criminal defence work. So you've worked on both sides of the system. So we're delighted to have you on our board, but what we'd like to do is find out a bit more about you. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi Rebecca, yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Originally, I'm from the West Midlands. I moved up to the outskirts of Liverpool in about 2011. I qualified as a lawyer back in the late 90s and went straight into private practice, doing some litigation work, including some defence work, before moving to Chester and working there. And then I joined the Crown Prosecution Service in about 2005. I worked there in all sorts of courts, from the magistrate through to the Crown Court, and left and joined the Health and Safety Executive in 2010, where I've worked ever since. And I basically prosecute mainly companies for breaches of health and safety law, which have led to people being injured or sadly killed. So that's my role at the moment. I've quite an extensive experience throughout the criminal justice system. In my spare time, I love really watching sports of all kinds, especially cricket and football. Obviously not been able to recently, but I'm hoping that will all change very soon.
Do you have a team?
I'm a West Brom fan. That's because my dad was and his dad was. And so it's a family thing that I didn't have much choice about, really.
So, Richard, about your first experience in a courtroom?
Well, my first experience in a courtroom was really daunting. I mean, you have 3 years as a degree, then you do your legal practice course, and then you have 2 years where you are shadowing someone and starting to learn on the job. But that first time in court, and you walk in and suddenly you've got a judge in front of you, it might be in the magistrate's court with the district judge, or even in the Crown Court, and everybody's in their robes and their gowns and their wigs, and you don't quite know where to sit or who to speak to, or who's going to go on first, and everybody else seems to know exactly what they're doing and you don't. So it's a really daunting feeling, even for someone who's come through and been trained. And I remember my first day actually as an advocate in the Crown Court, and I was able to sort of say, "Good morning, judge." And I was strictly told immediately, "Don't say good morning to the judge, let him say that to you." And the language that was used straight away was very different and very odd. And you have to fall into that and understand it as quickly as possible and follow everybody else. So it is incredibly difficult and daunting when you first walk into a courtroom, no matter who you are and no matter what training you've had.
I feel like that will resonate for a lot of the families that we work with. And I also worked at the courts as one of my first roles at POPs. And I can resonate with what you're saying about the language. It does feel like you're walking into a different country, doesn't it?
It does. And the whole idea that when you first walk in, you have to introduce the person who your opposition and talk about things like, "May it please your honour, but da 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 da," which is just not a phrase you would ever use anywhere else in normal language. Yeah. If I had a trial, I used to speak to witnesses and explain to them the language that would be used, because it would seem so strange, and just trying to acclimatise people that it is going to be a little odd in there and a little different. Yeah. I think it's quite bracing when you first walk into a courtroom, especially some of the older ones with the big oak panels and the judge sat in the very top and everyone dressed up. It's quite an intimidating atmosphere.
Yeah, that's the word I was going to say. I found it quite intimidating, particularly at the Crown. And tell me, Richard, what changes did you see over your time in the criminal justice system? What were the kind of major things that you saw change over that time?
I think one of the biggest things is the cutting of the number of courts across the country, which just meant that the closure of local courts with the less and less facilities and local people involved in decisions. So I used to work in Staffordshire, and there were 4 courts in Staffordshire, in Burton, Stafford, Cannock and Tamworth. And by the time I left, there was only one just in Cannock. So that meant people have got to travel a lot further. People have got to get up early, could have a 2-hour journey on a bus. So it's those sorts of things. I think the closure of courts, less and less people trying to streamline the procedures more and more. And I think less and less people doing more and more work. And I think that's probably the main thing that I saw in those 5 years. And I think although COVID has had a massive impact on the justice system with things like delays and things, I think it was already building prior to that.
Yeah, COVID has had a very significant impact, hasn't it? And you're probably seeing that in your current work as well, I imagine.
Very much so. I mean, we're already having trials listed now for 2022. And that's just an incredible stress on everybody involved, not just the victims, but also those actually facing the proceedings, the partners of the people facing the proceedings. It's a stress that they've got to hold over them now for the next 12, 18 months. And who knows what will happen then. So I think these are things that people need to get a hold of and actually understand a little bit more.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Richard, how did you come to hear about POPs?
Well, I was looking for opportunities to become a trustee and to get involved with a charity. And my wife, who works for Voluntary Sector Northwest in Manchester, saw that POPs were recruiting. So I started to do a little bit of research and was really impressed with the organisation, with its aims, its values, its principles, and the work that it was doing, and really wanted to get involved. Just felt that with 15 years in the criminal justice system and over 20 as a lawyer, I have some transferable skills that I was hoping could really put to some good and help and constructively help people.
Absolutely. And that was going to be my next question, actually. What is it that you hope to bring to the board? What is it that you believe that you can bring as part of your experience?
I think it's the benefit of 15 years as a lawyer in the criminal justice system. That brings with it an intimate knowledge of the system and a specific perspective. And I do understand both sides. I do understand the impact that, as I explained earlier, really, the impact it's had on everybody involved in the system. So I'd hope to bring also an analytical eye, but also a constructive voice that will just help shape the future of POPs.
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say that that's what we were hoping for from this round of trustee recruitment. We were looking for those objective voices to help us take the next steps. Can I ask you just one final question? And this is probably the question when I ask it that people say, oh, have you got an hour? If you could change one thing about the criminal justice system, what would it be?
I think that I would like to make criminal justice a higher priority when it comes to funding. I think that it would allow organisations like POPs to then provide the specialist help and support that people need, and that then benefits the entire criminal justice system and then takes some of the pressure off particular areas and allows that to go and do the bit that the job it wants to do, and allows people like POPs to concentrate on the things that they're good at. And I think just to become a slightly more higher priority when it comes to the national conscience, really.
That's great. Richard, thank you so much for your time. We're really privileged to have you joining our board, and hopefully we'll get to speak to you again soon.
Yes, thank you. And I look forward to working with you.